Hmm. Work. Hey, Lisa.
Okay.
There you are. You're sideways, girlfriend.
Oh, shoot. Okay. It's not, so it won't let me rotate. All right, I will hold my camera by hand, and so much for the selfie stick. You see me?
Yeah? Can you see me okay?
I can
Okay,
see you.
cool. So
You're
we're on.
um, super. Okay. All right,
Yeah,
so
this
how do
is
we tell?
great. So
It, it is. How do we tell if anybody else has joined us?
I can see everybody on here.
Okay, good.
So we're just gonna start.
Sounds good.
Um, yeah, we're just gonna start. So welcome to the baby making talks with Eva Lou, myself, and Lisa Grant. Lisa is a fertility expert in Las Vegas, and she works primarily with patients who need some TLC during their IVF journey. And she also works with other fertility patients. So, Lisa, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you got into this field?
So what I do primarily is I help women who are working, trying to improve their fertility, whether they want to do conceive naturally or whether they have chosen to go through IVF. And I got into this field because let me think about this, 24, 25 years ago, when I was actually trying to have children, that was way before I became an acupuncturist, I had a series of miscarriages. And this is back before IVF was even really a possibility for, everyday human beings. And nobody had any answers for me. All I knew was that I would get pregnant, but I couldn't stay pregnant. Um, and so once fast forward to about 14 years ago when I was looking for a new career, and I decided that I wanted to pursue acupuncture because at that point acupuncture had been helping me with a lot of digestive issues that I have. And as I got more into my training, I realized that I had something to offer through acupuncture to women who are having fertility issues like I had experienced, that 12 to 14 years previous. So I made a decision that I wanted to get extra training and do extra coursework in fertility so that I could maybe help women prevent experiencing, multiple miscarriages or not even being able to get pregnant at all. I started specializing in fertility about 8 years ago. And I actually this spring completed my board certification in acupuncture and fertility. That's what the letters FABORM after my name mean, is because I'm a fellow of the American Board of Oriental Reproductive Medicine. And that means that we've done um, extra training to a certain level deal in acupuncture and learning about not just acupuncture for fertility, but how we can integrate acupuncture for those patients who are going through IVF, and to make sure that we have the most recent knowledge and the best understanding of how we can serve our patients. So
Oh,
that is why I'm here today.
that's awesome. And I invited you on to talk with me and our listeners about baby making because I also have um, some new patients in my practice now who are trying, and I'm curious for them, and because they're always asking me, "Hey, Eva, do you know this or that?" And I also have my own period story. I'm not quite ready to try for a baby yet, but I'm sure it will help in the future too. So this is for you guys. you listeners out there who are having like issues, or you're just curious about what's going on, like what does it mean to you know start trying or like regulating your period, and
Mhm, mhm,
all of that, just like even going as far as IVF, and getting support for that. And Lisa is the perfect person to get some knowledge from. So thank you for joining us.
oh, my pleasure.
Um,
My pleasure.
yeah, I'm really happy that you're here with us. So,
I am too.
um, yeah, so today we're just going to start with talking about the period
Mhm,
and the ins and outs of it, just the basics, like why it's important. Um, a lot of women have issues with their period, like from
mhm.
pain to really heavy periods to light periods, no periods, you name it.
Clotting.
And yeah, and some people get on birth control, and then there are
Mhm,
definitely the hormonal issues such as
mhm,
endometriosis, PCOS, um, and those are some things that we're going to touch upon later in the four other talks that we're going to have. We're going to talk about difficult fertility issues in our next segment, which is also next Tuesday. So we're going to do like a 5-part series every single Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And if you guys can join us during this time, great. If not, this is going to be on my Facebook page, Eva Lou Acupuncture on Facebook, and Lisa
mhm,
is Spring Mountains Acupuncture. She's in Vegas. And we're also going to talk all about IVF in our third segment. And our fourth segment is going to be about trying naturally. If you
mhm,
guys aren't ready for going down the IVF route or considering other ways of um, having a baby. And the last one will be on October 9th, which is eating healthy and wearing naturally. Wearing healthy. So that's just about like all the things that you put into your body and how that affects your health, your hormones, even trying to conceive a baby. So
mhm.
today, again, we're gonna talk about all about your period, and let's just talk about the period and the parts of a period. Like, why is it important?
Well, I know a lot of patients are like, well, my period is when, it's all done. So why does it matter? It's like I get to start every cycle. And it's one of the things that's really important to understand is that um, it, working with women is great because our period almost acts like an MRI of what's going on internally. It tells, as an acupuncturist, it can tell us so much about the state of your health that's one of the reasons when you go into an acupuncturist and are working on periods or fertility, it's almost, we're really interested in the details, how much blood, it's like, what color is it? Does it change over the type of the cycle? Are there clots? How big are they? And it's a way for us to see the physical manifestation of the hormones and the energetics that are actually controlling the whole of your cycle, not just your period. So one way to think of it is your period is a window into what's happening. All right. Frequently I start off with asking my patients, yeah, what does it look like? And often the answer is, well, I don't know. I just, it just happens and I ignore it. And it's like, well, then what I'd like you to do is actually start paying attention and noticing what it is that you're seeing, because that will give me even more information about what's specifically going on with you. So understanding that the period is basically a window into your hormones means that women are much more comfortable and much more confident in starting to talk to us about what it is that's actually going on. So your period is actually one phase of 4 in your cycle. So, and each phase of your cycle, and to make it easy, we call them phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. But in each phase of your cycle, your hormones are doing something different. So you can think of your period as both the beginning of the next cycle, but also it lets us know what happened in the previous cycle so that we can be more effective in actually regulating the upcoming cycle. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah,
Good.
it totally does.
Okay. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about what the 4 phases are. The first phase, phase 1, is your period. Okay, and that ideally, and we're talking about an ideal cycle for the next few minutes. This may not be where women are, and that's perfectly fine. We start with where we are. So the first, ideally, what we'd like to do is have the period be 3 to 5 days. Okay, because 3 to 5 days of good, not heavy flow, but like moderate regular flow just lets us know that your endometrial lining is thick enough to actually support a good implantation by an embryo. Okay, um, occasional little clots, not a worry, it happens. But if you've got really clotty periods, what it lets us know is that few things, the energy flow when you're actually shedding your uterine lining is not consistent and is not regular. So there may be, as a result, cramping problems. It also lets us know that maybe the uterine lining isn't laying down smoothly when the woman's body is actually preparing the endometrial lining. And that's an important thing to know too, because, everybody wants, if what you want is a nice, smooth, even bed for the embryo to be able to implant in, but if you've got lumps and bumps, the embryo may actually sort of bounce off the lumps and the bumps, or if it's in a much thicker place, it may actually have trouble burrowing down to the layer that it needs to be in, and that's a problem. So what we want is a smooth shedding of the lining, because that lets us know that, hey, it's a good place for an embryo to try and to implant. Color is important. If your cycles tend to be, or your period tends to be really, really dark, that tells us that there's not a whole lot of oxygen going down there. Also, I find that my patients who tend to be really stressed out, their period blood tends to be really dark because the oxygen is not going down to their endometrial area. What it's doing is it's going everywhere else first. And we want to make a baby. So we want the uterus to be the priority for blood flow. So what you want is good, fresh, red blood. The color is important. If it's really light pink, that can indicate anemia or just not enough energetics going down to that area, so that the blood that's being produced isn't as rich as we'd like it to be. Other things, clots. Yeah, small clots like the head of a pencil eraser. Once in a while I don't worry about, but if they're really thick clots, then we need to actually do something to help re-regulate that throughout the whole cycle. Have I missed anything? Anything else that you've come
So
across?
we can
Say that
talk a
again?
little bit more about clots.
Okay.
So what is considered, like, for me, when I talk about clots with my patients, like,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they have purple clots that
Right.
are really big,
Mm-hmm.
such as anything between dime size and
Yep.
larger, like quarter
Mm-hmm.
size. So
Yep.
that's something that I use with them. Like, okay, how big is it? And another way that I talk about bringing more blood flow to the area is, okay, if your period color is darker, such as like
Mm-hmm.
really dark purple, or where it's
Like
almost like
brick
blue or
red,
black,
yeah, blue or black, or that really deep, dark brick red as opposed to a nice bright red. Mm-hmm.
um, that is something that I consider, like, okay, it's either really cold down there in the uterus, and temperature
Mm-hmm.
is really important. Maybe that
Uh-huh.
is something that you can touch upon as well, like with temperature, um, during this talk. And yeah, temperature is important because you need
Yep.
to regulate that temperature in order for a baby to grow and
Right.
incubate, essentially.
Right.
So, so the temperature can correspond and correlate with the color of the blood that's being
Mm-hmm.
shed
Mm-hmm.
during the
Mm-hmm.
period. Um, so some of the other things that I've seen with that is spotting. Like, what
Yeah.
happens with spotting?
Yeah. So spotting, a lot of women ask, so what's day one, right? What's the first day of my cycle? And the answer is it's full flow. It's like you have actual flow. Spotting is considered part of the previous cycle. Okay. So if you're counting or you're tracking your period on a basal body tracker or one of those fertility trackers, the first day of flow is what you consider day one. All right. And when you have spotting, um, often it means that your 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 again, the energy flow down to your uterus is not what we need it to be, because what your period should really be is like a faucet. You turn it on, you bleed, you turn it off, you're done. So spotting tells me that the energetics are a little bit unstable, and that things are not, the messages, the hormonal messages are not going down to, are not in your uterus as clean as we'd like them to be. What's causing the spotting kind of depends on the constitution of the woman. So if she tends to run cold, and if you're tracking on your basal body temperature, and you notice that, your basal body temperature in the second half of your cycle, let's go back to the ideal period, or the ideal cycle. In the second half of your cycle, which is post ovulation, first of all, your temperature goes up. And that's because when you are in the second half of your cycle, your body is progesterone dominant. And just like, mama hen sits on the eggs after she lays them, we want it to be nice and warm down there. But we don't want it too warm. It's always about the balance, not the extremes. If you have, if you tend to run cold and you notice that your basal body temperatures, ideally we want them between 97.9 and 98.2. That lets us know that you've actually got really good, strong progesterone. Okay. If your temperature is lower than that and you're spotting, what that tells me is you're not quite secreting as much progesterone as we'd like you to. And so it makes it a little trickier once you conceive to make sure that the embryo is going to implant and you're actually going to be able to hold on to it the way we want you to. So if you tend to run colder, you may notice that your BBT chart temperatures are lower and that you're spotting a lot more. One of the ways that you can check is, and I have my patients do this, is actually lay their hand on their abdomen and kind of get a sense of how warm it is there. And then they do it on their what we call like the hypochondriac area, so the area where your stomach is. And then actually up here on your chest too, because that'll give you a sense of, is there a big difference in those three zones of temperatures? And if you notice that your abdomen is definitely cooler to the touch, then that's going to be an indicator that your progesterone levels aren't quite where we want them, and you may spot. The other thing,
Right.
though, that sometimes can cause spotting is if you run too hot. Because in Chinese medicine, one of the ways that the body gets rid of heat is you bleed. And it may just be that things are so hot down there that your body is trying to shed some of that heat. So occasionally what I'll see is women who run really hot and they get a little bit of spotting too. Or more frequently, they actually just have really, really early periods. They don't hit the 28 to 30 day mark. They're actually having periods sooner. Okay. So temperature is important, and the spotting can be an indicator of what's going on in that second half of the cycle, and that you're just, your uterus doesn't have, you're not secreting as much progesterone as we'd like to see.
Yeah. So progesterone is essentially the hormone that keeps things incubating, and
Right.
once that declines, then you start your period.
Correct. And
And
if, yeah, sorry, don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
oh, no, you're good. And then so yeah, there's basically a flux in um, the hormones during your cycle, and Lisa can talk a little bit more about that and how that plays a part in your basal body temperature, how your temperature fluctuates. She had mentioned that when progesterone rises in your body's going to be a little bit more warm, and then
Mhm.
and when it starts to decline, when progesterone declines, then your body's going to taper down. The temperature is going to taper down. And what is your formula for that you teach your clients how to chart their BBT chart?
So one of the things that shocks all of my patients when we start talking about basal body temperature charting is that 98.6, which everybody has been taught is like the normal body temperature, that's only true for men. Okay. Your women's
Okay.
temperatures actually fluctuate pretty significantly during their cycle. And the first half of the cycle is actually, that's pre-ovulation. I actually want my patients between 97 and 97.4. All right, which is more, it's almost a degree and a half cooler than what is considered normal body temperature. So I always tell my patients when they start charting, don't freak out, okay? Because the likelihood that you're actually going to get to 98.6 is much lower. All right. So can we just really quick talk about the 4 phases? Let me tell them what it looks like so that then when I talk about the basal body temperature charting, it makes a little more sense.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Go for it.
So we talked about the phase 1 is your period. And most women notice that during their period, their temperatures are declining. Well, that makes sense because you're going from a progesterone dominant phase after you ovulate back down into an estrogen dominant phase, which is what happens after you have your period. Okay. So the beginning of your cycle, once your period is done, I want to see temperatures between 97 and 97.4. That's ideal. Okay. And that lets me know, hey, estrogen is doing really well. If your temperatures are lower than that, then you're definitely running really cold. And occasionally what I'll notice is that if my patients are having temperatures consistently in the 96s, that it could very well mean that there's a thyroid issue. So that's something that we often have to, check is if things are too low, then we need to check that. But if things are too hot, it means that you don't, because estrogen in Chinese medicine is considered a cool hormone. We consider it yin. It's a cool energetic. So if your temperatures are too high, then what it means is you don't have enough of the cool stuff in the second half warmer. So that's one of the reasons we have our patient's basal body temperature chart, is because it's a way for us to tell the energetics of what's going on, but also tracks the sort of the what's going on with the reproductive hormones. Oop, you've broken up into a really awesome pattern. Oh, there we go. Okay. The first half of the cycle, what I want, and then once you ovulate, you'll notice that your temperature spikes. And because once you ovulate, your ovary, the little follicle that was where the egg was developing, actually that's what secretes the progesterone to warm things up so that we can make sure that everything is nice and warm and young in the second half of the cycle. Okay, so when you're taking your basal body temperature, what we're doing is we're basically tracking your energetics of yin and yang, but also your progesterone and your estrogen. And here's the formula. You can do it one of 2 ways. If you research it on the internet, what you'll notice is that everybody says, okay, get up at the same time every day and take your temperature. That is the easy way to do it. All right, because that means that the fluctuate, because when you wake up, when it's later in the day, your temperatures go up. So that's easy, all right, for women who have like a 9-to-5 job. And then on the weekends, if you sleep in an hour or so, your temperature won't fluctuate enough that it's a problem, okay? But I live in Las Vegas, and this is a 24/7 economy. And a lot of women, it's like they get home at 2 in the morning, and I can't have them waking up at, 7 to take their temperature. It's just not fair. I want them sleeping. Okay, sleep is important. Sleep is when your eggs develop. Sleep is when you heal. Sleep is really important. So who work either graveyard or swing shift or have just, like crazy temperature, or excuse me, crazy schedules where some days they're waking up early and some days they're waking up late. What I have them do is I teach them this nifty little adjustment formula that makes it look like they got up at the same time every day, even though they didn't. And here's the formula. You pick a baseline time, and that's the time that you get up the most frequently during the week. Okay. And then you either adjust the temperatures back to or up to the baseline time, depending on, the time that you wake up every morning. It's a little more involved, and it does involve math for adjusting back and forth. But for those women who have wake up times that are inconsistent during the week and who really do need to sleep because they're getting to sleep late on some nights and early on other nights, it's really easy. And it's actually one of the things that I teach my patients when they come in, because it takes a little while to get the hang of the adjustment process. But it's one of the things that I teach my patients. Then I'll be teaching women in the online courses that I'm going to be starting in the beginning of or mid of October, so that they can track their cycles a little bit more consistently and not have these crazy spikes and drops, which may actually be more indicative of what time they're waking up than it is of what's happening with their hormones. So the easy thing is just get up at the same time every day. And if you have a 9 to 5, that's an easy thing to do. But for women who have schedules that are a little bit more variable, the adjustment method actually makes it so that the temperature tracking is actually more accurate and gives us more accurate information.
Okay, great. Yeah, so Lisa, I think your suggestion with if you have a normal 9 to 5 job, then getting up consistently every single day and taking your body temperature. I suggest to my patients, like right before they get out of bed while they're still in bed, and keeping the temperature, the thermometer right beside their bed.
Yeah.
That way
And
they
that's,
have.
yeah, Eva, that's not a suggestion, that's a gotta. Because one of the things that'll
Okay, got to.
happen, no, you have to, because the thing is that, remember, it's a basal body temperature. It's basically the measure of your lowest metabolic rate. And if you get up and start moving and go to the bathroom, your temperature is going to spike. Okay. And at a
Yes.
minimum, what we're looking at in that difference between the first half of the cycle and the second half of the cycle, we need a minimum of 4/10 of a degree. And what's happened is if my patients get up and go to the bathroom and wash their face and then go, oh yeah, I got to take my temperature. Often just that simple 2 minutes up and out of bed. Remember, metabolism is what your body is the energy that your body is producing to do stuff. Their temperatures will often spike past that 4/10 of a degree. So then we don't really know what is going on, because they wind up with a graph that, instead of looking relatively smooth, looks like this. And if it's super jaggedy,
Right.
then you and I, as the acupuncturists, are going to look at that and have a very different conclusion about what's going on than if if that's just a result of the fact that they got up and went to the bathroom and went, oops, forgot. So, so what I tell my
Yeah,
patients,
exactly.
yeah. So it's not, I suggest, it's you gotta. And what I tell my patients is, because most people at this point use their phone as an alarm, put the thermometer on your phone. Because if you're waking up to an alarm and you turn the alarm off, then the thermometer will literally be under your fingers when you wake up. So then you remember, oh yeah, I got to take my temperature.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Just put your thermometer on top of your alarm and just take your temperature before you get up. That way you can remain consistent. So, you talked about like teaching a class to people. When is this again? In October? And how do they sign up
So
for it?
so my pilot program is going to be mid-October. If they're interested in signing up, they can actually just head over to my web my website, which is springmountainsacupuncture.com, and mountains is plural. You can also find it, if you're not sure of the spelling, by Googling Lisa Grant Las Vegas acupuncture, and it should pop up. And I will have, there's a contact inquiry form that you can click on and fill out and just indicate that you're interested in taking the class. One of the other things that I'm happy to do is have people, women, fill that out and just ask for a 15-minute phone consult, so we can see if I think that the class is an appropriate option for them. And this is primarily targeted for women who are not in the Las Vegas area and who may not actually have access to an acupuncturist who has any familiarity with fertility, because it's still very much a specialty area. And I know you're starting to do more of that in your practice, and I know that you've had some training in it, and that's great. But there are a lot of women who live in areas that they don't have access to anybody at all. And
Exactly.
right? And and while, you know, I wish I could figure out a way to do acupuncture over the internet, I can't. But the idea of the course is to teach women what it is that they need to know, not just about their cycles and their hormones, but we're going to go more into depth into all of the topics that we're going to be covering during these talks. And that is, if they have specific fertility issues, you know, we'll talk about what to do with that. I'll train them in how to track their basal body chart to be able to read it, because there's a lot of things that I can teach women to do independent of acupuncture for how to read the BBT and be able to actually adjust their lifestyle so that it actually smooths out. You know, one of the questions I always get is well, how much exercise is enough or how much is too much? And the interesting thing is the BBT can tell you what's enough and what's too much and what's not enough when you know how to read it. You know, I can often use it to suggest if a woman has been trouble getting pregnant, and based on you know, her history, and I will have all my patients online or taking the course fill out an intake form. If I see anything pop up in terms of, okay, these are the tests that I'd like you to have your OBGYN run, because I'm seeing something that suggests that this might be what's going on. So I can't necessarily diagnose them, but I can counsel them on these are some of the areas, because even working with OBGYNs here in Las Vegas, OBGYNs are not specifically trained in problematic reproductive issues. So they don't always know which tests to run. And so, you know, over the part of the training that I got as an ABORM fellow, as an ABORM board certification, was these are the kinds of tests that we can suggest to our patients have their doctors run, so that we can maybe figure out some of the underlying medical conditions that might be an issue. So, and we'll talk about more of some of the other things that we'll do in the course over the next four weeks. But if you're interested, just shoot me a contact inquiry from my website. And I'd be happy to do like a 15 to 20-minute consult, and then we'll just take it from there.
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Lisa. And yeah, actually next week we're going to talk about difficult fertility issues. So if that's something that you guys want to listen in on and you have questions about, shoot either myself or Lisa a private message
Yep.
via Facebook or email, or just call. That works
Or
too.
call.
Yes, or call. So some of the other things that we wanted to talk about is, like, how does birth control affect the period?
So birth control basically makes your body think that it's pregnant. All right. And it's difficult to BBT chart when you're on birth control, because what birth control does is it just holds your hormones in one place. Okay. Which means that we don't have an accurate indicator of what's going on. The other thing is from a Chinese medicine point of view, remember, your cycle is about the movement of hormones and the movement of energy. And if you are holding something in place, what it means is that things aren't moving, and ultimately they get stuck. So birth control from a Chinese medicine point of view actually interferes with the smooth flow of energy, which is the domain of the liver meridian. And a lot of women who have been on birth control, Western medicine suggests, and I agree with this suggestion wholeheartedly, is that if you want to get pregnant, you really need to be off birth control for at least 3 months before you're trying to get pregnant, because your brain has been stuck in one position for however long you've been taking your birth control. And your brain needs time to actually synchronize your pituitary and your hypothalamus so that it can actually resync your hormones. Okay. Often what I'll see is that for certain types of women, and it depends on their constitutional energetics, some women come off of birth control, no problem, they're fine. But other women come off of birth control and they can't get their periods back on a regular cycle. And remember, you know, we talked a little bit about This is called a period for a reason. It's a cycle, it's a period. It happens, certain things happen periodically. And if your brain can't get that cycle and that rhythm back in, you're not going to have any idea when you're ovulating. You're going to have no idea if the eggs that are developing, your follicles, are actually healthy, because we don't know. They're not getting the hormonal inputs that they need because your pituitary can't secrete things in the appropriate way. So birth control it's a double-edged sword. It's given women so much freedom to be able to pursue
Yeah, that's
our lives and our careers, and not constantly be tied to our cycle. But it does have an effect on fertility. So it means that we need to respect the wisdom of the body. And if you can't get your cycle back on a regular, between 28 to 30 is ideal, but really 28 to 32 is okay. But if you're having regularly irregular cycles and they're just swinging all over the place, or they're consistently really short or really long after you get off of birth control, that's something that the acupuncture can help, because what we do is we're helping retrain the brain and the pituitary and the hormones. We're helping them reestablish that cyclical natural wisdom.
yes, it does. Like acupuncture is great. I mean, my own period story was it was all over the place. I never knew when my period was coming. And so finally, like I started acupuncture and herbs about 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, almost 8 years ago. And um, I stopped spotting.
Yep.
My periods were like normal, finally regulated instead of these super heavy periods that were
Oh,
painful.
yeah.
And
Yep.
I always had PMS. Like I was the worst person to be around. And you probably won't be able to even imagine that right now.
No, I
But
can't imagine that at all.
but yeah, it helps out so much because I like even before I start my period, I sometimes don't even know that it's gonna come, but I know that it's gonna come because
Right.
it's regulated to a point where okay, I know it's gonna come, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I'll get some of the PMS symptoms, but they're definitely not as nearly as bad as they used to be.
What do you
So that's
what do you tell your patients about PMS? What do you talk to them about when they come in and they say, I've got this terrible PMS? How do you explain that? What's going on to them?
oh, we talk about what's going on with them. Like everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
Some women have tender breasts. Some
Mm-hmm.
women are just absolutely irritable,
Mm-hmm.
from
Weepy.
like weepy or
Mm-hmm.
just annoyed, like on the edge. Sometimes there are headaches involved. Sometimes just get cramping all over the body, fatigue, you name it. And um, so we go from that point of view, like from
Have
the
you
patient's point of view.
have you ever told your patients that PMS is not actually normal? It's not. You know
Yes,
that, right? PMS is not
yes,
normal. PMS is an indicator that there's a hormonal imbalance. You're not supposed to get PMS. So if you're
no,
getting PMS, no, if you're getting PMS, look, no unnecessary suffering. It's like go find an acupuncturist, preferably one of us, but that's
exactly.
okay. But get some help resolving it, because PMS is not supposed to be a normal part of a cycle, and there's no reason for women to suffer through that and just think, oh, that's just the way it always is, because it's not.
No, it's not. And many women, including myself, like who have gone through acupuncture, report saying that, oh my gosh, like my period comes and goes and
Yep.
there's no sign of PMS,
Right.
especially if they have experienced that and things are a lot easier. And it's like, wow, okay, I can actually live a life without the pain, without the annoyance, without, you can be around that person.
What I
Um,
really like is when the partner comes in with the woman that I'm treating and says, and the woman's like, yeah, I'm not sure I notice anything different. And the partner's like, oh no, trust me. I can actually live I can live with her now. Thank you so much for fixing the PMS. Because
right.
often it's the partner that's more aware of the changes in the PMS. So,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
no unnecessary
It's so
suffering for either partner.
exactly. And you know, it's a blessing, like when you can actually achieve that. And I think, you know, a lot of women can't imagine that. And
I know.
how do you, like, just, I don't know, like, how do you talk to your patients about, like, what it's like to be on PMS or going off of, like, experience a life without PMS?
It's a matter of, that's actually one of the things that's the easiest to resolve, I've found, is PMS. It
Hmm.
responds so dramatically. I can usually get rid of like the worst of the PMS systems in less than a month. So that if a woman comes in fairly soon after the beginning of her period, that next month she will notice a 50% more or decrease in the amount of PMS. Um,
Hmm.
and you know, you know, we all always compare ourselves to everybody else, and you know, so they'll be like, well, you know, I get really weepy and or cravings are their big one.
Yeah.
And you know, well, but my friends, you know, they seem to be, but they don't get weepy, so I just thought it was me. I just thought that that's sort of the way it has to be. um, and so, you know, explaining to them that no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. It should be like I said, it's a faucet. You turn it on, you turn it off, you're done.
Hmm.
um, you know, often one of the when you're right before your period, a lot of women don't like exercising. um, but what I ask my
Yeah.
patients is, look, just one of the reasons, from a Chinese medicine point of view, the reason that we get PMS is often because we're transitioning from that higher energetic of the progesterone and the yang down into the more yin, lower energetic, you know, resonance of excuse me, this is yang and this is yin. So
Hmm.
and that's controlled by the liver meridian, and the liver meridian doesn't necessarily negotiate that change really well. And but the liver meridian, because it flows movement. So even if you can only go out walking, you know, a few times a week, and I'm not talking going to the gym and hardcore, you know, what is that thing that they do at 5 a.m., those boot camp things? No, 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 no. All you need to do is actually move. And so many of us have these office jobs where we're sitting in a chair from 9 to 5 and we get no real movement. Then you go home and you're exhausted, so you sit in a chair. So what I tell my patients is either before you go to work, just 10 to 15 minutes, or before you sit down, because once you get home and you sit down, you're done. It's not, you're not going to move anymore. But you know, once you get in the door, wash your hands, take a drink of water, and then go walk. But if you could just walk for like 15, 20 minutes a few times a week, that is actually a really natural way to help resolve some of the issues that come along with PMS, because what you're doing is you're nurturing and you're nourishing the liver meridian, which wants you to move in all aspects of life, emotionally and physically and energetically. So and it's remarkable. They'll come back and they'll go, yeah, I didn't feel like it. And I'm like, nobody ever feels like exercising. So I don't want you to wait until you feel like it. Just go do it. So they'll come back and they'll say, yeah, I just feel better. And I notice that I'm not as cranky, or I'm not as weepy, or I'm not as crampy, or I just feel better. So that's a really easy, natural way to help deal with a symptom that causes way more misery and suffering than it should.
Yeah. And what's interesting too, like the more I practice with this population of women, just, you know, who are in their reproductive years, um, the
Mm-hmm.
yin meridians up along the inside of the legs, like they get super, super tight.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I love to
Mm-hmm.
tell them is, hey, have your partner or yourself, like just massage them, massage the
Yep.
insides of your thighs, calves, you know, get things softened. So like when your
That's a
period
great
comes, like
idea.
it's a lot easier to deal with. And it doesn't have to be like a really, you know, hard, deep massage.
No,
It
no,
can
no,
be
no.
just like very simple, like strokes, just to
Mm-hmm.
get things moving. And it just like eases the tension through the body as well.
Yep.
So that's one thing that I love to give to my patients.
Oh, that's a
Um,
great idea.
Yeah, and it's fun too. Like if you get your partner involved, it can be sexy time too. So anyway,
We'll
yeah,
talk about
so
that again in part 4.
yeah, we can talk more about that in part 4. Um, yeah, so like we talked a little bit about regulating your hormones with the BBT charting, which help regulate your hormones.
Mhm.
And Lisa's gonna talk more about that in her upcoming class in October. And um, can you tell us why it's also important? You talked a little bit about this, like
Mhm.
why it's important to prepare for the baby or IVF, like with the period. Why is that so important for mom?
Right. So going into IVF, okay, what Western medicine doesn't have any way exactly to tap into the abilities of a woman's body to actually help improve egg quality and improve hormones. Okay. So what IVF basically does is it goes in and by hyperstimulating the ovaries, they withdraw a whole bunch of follicles and then they put them in a petri dish with the sperm. The reason that I recommend to all my patients who are going through IVF to have treatment of acupuncture for at least 3 months beforehand is this. It takes 90 days to develop a really healthy follicle. Okay. And the reason for that is that women are born with all of the follicles that they're ever, all the eggs that they're ever going to create. So when you are developing in utero, and you're a woman, your ovaries actually, develop all the eggs that you're going to have. And then they kind of go into cold stasis. Okay. And then
Yes.
once you hit puberty, it reactivates the process. And what happens is every month, actually right around the time that you have your period, the pituitary sends a message to your ovaries and it recruits a cohort, it means a whole, like a group of follicles to develop over the next 90 days. And what happens during that 90 days is some of them do great and develop awesomely, and some of them, fall by the wayside because they just aren't great candidates. They don't have the receptors or whatever it is. But by recruiting a whole group of follicles at the beginning of the 90 days, what your body does is it ensures that when you get to the end of that 90-day cycle and you start the beginning of that fourth month, that you have a whole crop of really healthy follicles. And then one of them, and this is actually the one that has responded best to the hormones that your pituitary secretes, one of them gets the golden ticket and it gets to ovulate. Okay. So what we do in Chinese medicine is we actually work from the beginning of that whole process. And through that 90-day process, we're constantly ensuring that the hormones that the eggs are getting, that your nutrition, that, the things that you're eating, dealing with stress hormones, making sure that energetically things are balanced and you're not giving all of your fertility energy away to the outside world. You're actually reserving and conserving some of that for what, you want, and that is to make a baby. We actually help that whole process so that when you get to the point where you start ovulating, after that 3 months, those follicles that you're the eggs that you're ovulating are as healthy as we can help them be. Okay. The reason that's important for IVF is because IVF, often what they'll say is we need to start now, especially if a woman has a condition called diminished ovarian reserve, which means that they look in there with an ultrasound and they're counting the number of developing follicles that she has, and they realize, oh gosh, she doesn't have very many. They can't do anything to improve the number of follicles that a woman has. So they only see it as it's always down. It's a straight line down. There's only one direction the number of eggs you have goes, and it goes down. Okay. So they will often tell a woman, we need to do this now. The issue is that you wind up going into IVF with follicles that maybe aren't as healthy as we could make them. And so often what we can do is we can improve the quality of the eggs that a woman has going into IVF so that eggs, but she will get more healthy eggs, which means that during IVF, she will have a larger number of eggs that fertilize, that make it to day 5, and that are then actually capable of being transferred in. It's like what I tell my patients is if you're going to do IVF, I only want you to do it once. I want you to get a huge number of healthy, happy embryos, and then you can transfer as many as you want, because it's the age and the health of the eggs that determines the outcome of IVF. So it's really important to regulate your period and your cycle and make sure that you're getting all of these energetic and hormonal inputs that help develop healthy, happy eggs, because it'll improve the outcome of the IVF. IVF is expensive. IVF is basically, I'm writing college tuition checks. I'm writing college tuition checks. IVF is the same as the cost of college. Okay. So it's if and some women, we have to go to IVF. All right. We can't cure everything. I wish I could, but sometimes IVF is the only option. Okay. So if that's the
Right.
case, I want to do it once. It's like, and what we can do as fertility acupuncturists to improve the quality of the eggs means that often a couple doesn't have to go through multiple cycles. Because if you go into an IVF cycle with eggs that are of poor quality, you will often wind up doing 2 and 3. And that's the fact that it's expensive. It's hard. So, I would like to make this process as easy and as helpful for my patients as I can. And that means if I can get them in for several months of treatment before they go to IVF, it works a lot better. Not to mention the fact that the drugs make you nuts. And so if, and acupuncture previous to fertility, or previous to IVF, we can often pretty much eliminate all those crazy symptoms that women talk about when they're going through IVF. So, they don't go insane for those 2 weeks that they're stimming.
Yeah, and that's something that you've been talking about too, just with me privately, and maybe
Yeah.
it's something that you would share with everybody else, like how you can support women as they're going through their IVF journey, journey. Um,
So,
yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about, like, yes, it is a difficult process of going through like the injections of, and it takes a lot of energy on the woman's part too, to receive these injections. And then, once the embryo's implanted, baby's healthy, embryo's healthy, and you are incubating for like 9 months, like
right,
that also takes a toll on the body as well. So like with
right.
further acupuncture support, that can help with the energy and keeping baby,
hmm
healthy
hmm
during the
Yep,
pregnancy as well. Um,
yep.
can you tell us a little bit more about how you can support these
No,
women?
absolutely. We're talking about this in phase 3. Yeah. The third talk too, though, right? Is that when we're going to talk IVF?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, all about
So,
IVF in week 3.
right. So we definitely want to go more in depth then. But one of the things that I want my patients to think about is it's not enough just to get pregnant. All right. Getting pregnant is the first step in the journey of helping develop this healthy, happy baby. And it's what we want to do with the acupuncture for fertility previous to doing IVF. Actually, in addition to regulating the hormones and getting the egg, helping the development of the follicles, we're actually putting more energy in the egg so that it can sustain itself while it's developing in, I don't know if it's a petri dish or a test tube, but there's that 5-day incubation period when the embryo is having to develop, and it's completely on its own. It mirrors the journey of the embryo in a woman who's conceived naturally. Ovulation, conception happens within 24 hours of ovulation. And then there's a 5 to 6 day journey when the embryo is actually traveling down the fallopian tube, hangs out at the end of the fallopian tube for a day or two, and then it gets the go ahead and it actually then implants in the endometrial lining. But it's totally on its own during those 5 days, whether it's IVF or whether it's naturally. And what we want to do is make sure that the egg has enough energy in it to be able to sustain that journey. Okay. When a woman is going through IVF, though, I did remember I said that they're hyperstimulating. It's a woman is getting
Yes.
like 5 to 10 times the normal amounts of estrogen, because what the reproductive endocrinologist is trying to do is get as many follicles to develop as possible, so they can, withdraw that, withdraw those, or retrieve those follicles. And look, any woman
Hmm.
who's ever had a period and had an episode of PMS, imagine PMS like times a factor of like 10 to 100 to 1,000. And I know that there's at least one person who's watching who's been through IVF. And so you can say something there in the comments if you want, that, look, it's IVF is a miracle. There are families who would never get started. There are couples that would never have children without the assistance of the IVF. But like birth control, like any medication, it's a double-edged sword, and the drugs will make you crazy. All right. So one of the things that we can do is acupuncture for for IVF actually helps the woman's body absorb the drugs and respond to the drugs better. But at the same time, it also helps diminish the symptoms that come along with the drugs. And some of the symptoms, often hot flashes and night sweats, can be almost like they're going premenopausal because there's like estrogen dominant. So we can definitely help calm down the hot flashes and the night sweats. We can definitely help, regulate their emotional state so that they're not like going nuts. Bloating happens a lot because you're basically putting all this, estrogen into your belly with these shots. So we can actually
Hmm.
help the circulation up and down the abdominal area with both blood and energy so that you don't get all the bloating and stuff like that. So even if, you're in an IVF cycle right now, or you're just going to start one, it's totally worth going to see an acupuncturist, because even while though nobody could change the quality of the eggs at this stage of the game, if you're like getting ready to stim now, you can totally get help with the symptoms, and it makes the IVF process so much easier to bear.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that experience. That's great. Um, so we're gonna close up soon. Is there something that you want to add on to our talk?
I just, it's acupuncture is amazing because we're working with the body and helping it regulate itself and do what it is that it wants to do. And women, what biologically what we do is we have kids. And so there's no need to suffer through infertility or period problems, unassisted. Acupuncture can do a lot to help regulate the period, even if you're not interested in getting pregnant. We're just interested in eliminating
Yeah.
suffering in the world, right? So even if it's not about fertility, even if it's just you have lousy periods, see an acupuncturist, because pretty much any acupuncturist has gotten some training in how to deal with period symptoms. Okay. If you need to regulate your period and your cycles because you're dealing with fertility issues, going to somebody who has some experience in it, and works with, the population of women trying to get pregnant, um, we can definitely help improve that journey. We can't promise that we can get you pregnant, but honestly, IVF doesn't either. It's not a guarantee, but we can definitely move you significantly in the right direction. I have any number of women who've been able to cancel IVF cycles because they've gotten pregnant naturally over the course of treatment. And if you're in an area where you don't have an acupuncturist, or if you know anybody who's struggling with fertility and lives in an area where they can't access an acupuncturist, then have them check out, my website, and either call me or shoot me a contact inquiry, because I would love to talk to them about either one-on-one consultation or maybe getting started on the course that I'm going to be having in October.
Yes, exactly. And um, if you guys are liking this, please share with your friends who are
Yes,
thinking about
please share.
either conceiving or have for like PMS issues. Like PMS is such like like a great thing to treat with acupuncture.
Right.
I can tell you stories forever and forever. So
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that can be treated with acupuncture, and just regulating periods, the different parts about a period. And in the following 4 weeks, we're going to talk about difficult fertility issues. We're going to talk about IVF, like what that means, advanced maternal age. We're going to talk about trying naturally, if that's something that you guys want to do, and also like what you put in your body, how that can affect your fertility as well. So we're going to finish here. And if you guys liked it,
This was
follow Lisa
great,
and I.
Eva. Yep.
Lisa's at Spring Mountains for acupuncture, Spring Mountains Acupuncture
Hmm.
in Las Vegas. And I'm at Eva Lou Acupuncturist. Acupuncture, I'm having a hard time speaking today. Eva Lou Acupuncture in San Diego. And if you are looking for an acupuncturist, you can contact either one of us. So we'll see you next time, next Tuesday at 11 for difficult fertility issues. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you,
Have a great
Eva.
day.
Bye
Thanks,
all.
Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.